Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Pen Vicarage on this Thursday. Great to see you, and thank you, as always, for joining us today. And do please, by the way, do share these messages with your friends. We are working our way through the Gospel of Mark, and we're in chapter 12 now. And just to kind of set the scene, it's always important, always remember when you're doing any kind of Bible reading, always know the context, the who, the where, the why, the where, all the little details. And the context of this is that Jesus is in Jerusalem. He's coming to Jerusalem on Palm Sunday. When he's there, he has cleared the temple. He's turned over the money changers and that sort of stuff. And now he starts getting the opposition. And he gets a lot of opposition. 2 days ago, it was kind of the bigwigs, the chief priests and the top people. Yesterday, we had him being opposed by an interesting collection of the Pharisees and the Herodians. And today, the Sadducees come and have their turn. So here's how it pans out. Mark chapter 12, starting to read at verse 18. Some Sadducees who say there's no resurrection came to Jesus and asked him a question, saying, "Teacher, Moses wrote for us that if a man's brother dies, leaving a wife but no child, the man shall marry the widow and raise up the children for his brother. There were 7 brothers. The first married, and when he died, left no children. And the second married her and died, leaving no children. And the third likewise. None of the 7 left children. Last of all, the woman herself died. In the resurrection, whose wife will she be? For the 7 had married her." Jesus said to them, "Isn't this the reason that you are wrong, that you know neither the scriptures nor the power of God? For when they rise from the dead, they neither marry nor are given in marriage, but are like angels in heaven. And as for the dead being raised, have you not read in the book of Moses, in the story about the bush, how God said to him, 'I am the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob'? He's the God of not of the dead, but of the living. You are quite wrong." This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Right. So, Jesus, as I say, is in Jerusalem, and he gets various groups come and oppose him. He gets a lot of opposition, as they might say in a war film, incoming! So we have different, and today we have the Sadducees. And I think it's important actually to recognise that these different groups, they may sound similar, but actually they're very, very different. Pharisee and Sadducee may sound similar to us, but they're actually very, very different. In fact, they couldn't stand each other. Let me tell you a bit about who the Sadducees were. Sadducees had been around about 200 years, about the same time as the Pharisees, since the Maccabean revolt. They've been the Sadducees about 200 years. They were a much smaller group than the Pharisees, and they were. They tended to, their teaching focus was particularly on the first 5 books of the Bible, what you might call the Pentateuch, whereas the Pharisees had a slightly wider perspective of the Old Testament. The big thing was they didn't believe in the resurrection. So you can always remember which is which, because by not believing in the resurrection, that means they are Sadducee. Corny, but you won't forget it. It's horrible, isn't it? They were also pretty rich and pretty well-to-do. It's been speculated that in the story, which I think is in Luke's Gospel, of the rich man and Lazarus, the rich man, and he dresses in purple and eats sumptuously all day and doesn't care too much about life after death until he dies. It's thought that he may have been a Sadducee. So it's with that in mind, it's one of these people who approaches Jesus today with this question. But the big thing being that they didn't believe in life after death. They didn't believe in the resurrection. The Pharisees did, Jesus did, but these people, the Sadducees, didn't believe in the resurrection. So, with that in mind, they come to Jesus with this kind of worked scenario. And the idea was in those days that, in the book of Moses, that if a man was married and he died, then the younger brother would marry his wife to kind of look after her. If you think that's far-fetched, let's not forget that that's how Henry VIII ended up with Catherine of Aragon. Because Catherine of Aragon had been married to Henry VIII's elder brother Arthur. But Arthur died, so Henry married Catherine of Aragon. So if you think this is it's the only time it happened, it isn't, because that's how Henry VIII ended up with Catherine of Aragon. Another story for another day. And this ridiculous situation they present is that a woman basically marries 7 times without having any children. And what they say at the end is, she's been married 7 times. If there's a resurrection, whose wife will she be? And you can almost hear them sort of chuckling, if there's a resurrection, whose wife will she be? And it kind of reads, I think, a bit like a kind of worked example. And you might get yourself out of that one, explain that one. And that's the kind of spirit with which these Sadducees approach Jesus. So they present Jesus with this bizarre scenario. And Jesus kind of says to them, look, you've got this completely wrong. You don't understand the scriptures and you don't understand the power of God. When it comes to the power of God, he says, you've misunderstood really completely about the resurrection. In the resurrection, people won't be married in the way that they are now. Now, before that sounds horrific to us, it isn't. We will see our loved ones again. I'm convinced about that. But in heaven, I don't believe we'll be married in the way that we are at the moment. Why? And that, 'cause it sounds awful. Why is that? Simply because, to be honest, heaven is going to be so good. God is so good. And obviously there won't be any need for procreating children because we'll all be there already, you know. So heaven is going to be so good. We won't need to get married in the way that we do at the moment. So I think what he's saying is you don't understand the power of God because you've misunderstood just how fantastic heaven is going to be. And I think actually we don't talk enough about heaven in church. I don't think we talk enough about the hope that we have. I heard about a preacher once who used to begin every sermon by saying, when we get to heaven. That kind of says it all. And I heard a story about a monk once who was about to die. And when asked how you feel, he said, I feel excited. Oh, how does the Bible put it? Eye has not seen, nor ear heard, nor the heart of man conceive what God has prepared for those who love him. So in heaven, we won't be married in the way that we want. And that's the reason simply being because heaven is going to be so fantastic. And obviously, as I say, there won't be a need to create children or anything like that. So we won't need to get married in the way they are. And the Sadducees had misunderstood the power of God. They'd misunderstood how good and how fantastic God is. And the other reason they got it wrong is because they'd misunderstood the Bible. They hadn't understood the scriptures. And Jesus reminds them of the time when God had appeared to Moses in the burning bush. And he said, I am the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. And Jesus said, look, we don't believe, God is not the God of the dead, but of the living. But, you know, if you say that you believe in God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, according to you, they're dead. How can it be that God is the God of the dead? Absolutely not. So what he's saying is there is a resurrection and there is life after death. And people like Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob will be there. And I think it's very important to us to get this message as well. Because I think actually in our Christian life, we need help. And I think we need encouragement. And we can encourage each other. You may have heard in the creed that we say, we talk about a thing called the communion of saints. I think lots of people say they believe in it every week without having much idea what it's about. And I think what it means is that the saints on earth and the saints in heaven are there to cheer, we're there to cheer each other on. And I think in the same way that, if you're in a race or something like that, and you get you have the crowd on the side, come on, come on, come on. I think in the same way, actually, as we go through the race with God, as we go through with our Christian journey, it's great to know that the saints in heaven are cheering us on too. You know, you could imagine you've got St. Peter in the front row, and you've got some of your friends in the second row, who've passed away in the second row. And as you're going through with God, and as you're making decisions each day, and as you're praying, as you go through life, as we're going through the trials and tribulations of life, we do not do so alone. God is with us. Our friends are with us on earth, but also the community, the communion of saints in heaven is cheering us on too. Because God is not the God of the dead, but of the living. And we can really appreciate the fact that those living saints are there, cheering us and helping us and encouraging us as we do. So that's Jesus' response to the Sadducees. They had misunderstood the power of God because they didn't realize just how fantastic and amazing the resurrection is going to be. It's going to be beyond our wildest dreams. They had misunderstood, misapprehended, misjudged, and failed to appreciate the power of God. And they misunderstood the scriptures too, because God's not the God of the dead, but of the living. And if Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob are there, then that means they have to be alive, which means that there's a community of saints cheering us on, encouraging us, egging us from the stands. So as you go through your Christian journey today, see if you can almost imagine you've got the crowd of saints around us, encouraging us, helping us, and cheering us on as we do. God bless you.